Boy, that was obnoxious.
What are you doing over there, Denise?
Joel and I refuse to give up if you're trying to get us to get off.
Yeah, Denise wants us to hang up now.
Oh, okay. All right.
There seems to be a lot of noise going on here, so I don't know if things are working.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Emmett Evans,
Here.
Mr. Andrew Getz,
Here.
Mr. Pickens Price, Mr. Dale Maggard,
Here.
Mr. Andrew Pittman,
Present.
Mr. Mark Philman,
Here.
Mr. Paul Fenora.
Here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Since this is a virtual meeting, I have a couple things I need to get on the record. The VPOH Planning and Policy Committee is an advisory body appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. We meet once a month, depending on if there are any proposed development applications that are to be planned and developed in the villages of Pasadena Hills. The Planning and Policy Committee serves as the local planning agency only for the applications within the boundaries of the villages of Pasadena Hills. The Planning and Policy Committee holds public hearings and transmits to the Board of County Commissioners recommendations on the VPOH Goal FLU 6 Comp Plan, Chapter 600 Land Development Code amendments, rezonings, and conditional use requests. If anyone is in opposition to any comprehensive plan amendment, land development code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning and Policy Committee transmits a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, it is important that you attend the appropriate BOCC meetings. Okay, the minutes from last month. Do we have those?
They're not on the agenda.
Okay, but we need to approve those minutes from last month, correct? Nope,
There's no minutes to approve.
I didn't hear you. What was that? No? Okay, okay, all right. I presume we're gonna have public comment today. Do we need to swear everyone in?
I just got notice that there are people at the kiosk in the other building that may want to speak, so you may need to tie them in now and swear them in.
Well, they're
Whatever you have to do.
yeah. Did you guys have anybody go over there?
Yes, Patty's there now.
Okay.
She just texted me and said that there are people there who want to speak.
What's the other bill?
Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and swear everybody in now. Can we do that? Okay, let's do that.
Everybody would raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
It's awful quiet, but I guess everybody got sworn in, right? Okay, great. Okay. All right, so we have two agenda items today. The first one is a consent, the RLE overpass MPUD within the villages. The staff recommends it. Do we want any comment on that, or we want to approve it as written? Okay. All right. So we will.
Shall I read it into record?
Yes. Why don't we do that?
Sure,
That's
thank
what I'm
you.
looking for.
Thank you so much.
I feel a
Mr.
little
Chair.
boxed in today. I'm a little off my
You're in your penalty box.
Yeah.
Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. Item P1 is PDD 27483. It's a zoning amendment. RLE Overpass MPUD Master Plan Unit Development, Villages of Pasadena Hills Village J. RLE Ranch Inc. It's for a rezoning request from AC Agricultural District to an MPUD Master Plan Unit Development District to allow 259 single-family detached dwellings on approximately 200 acres. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions as included in your agenda packet. And we're here for any questions, and we may want to ask for public comment to see if those that are at the kiosk may want to speak on this item.
Okay. It's on the consent. Do I really need to hear public comment?
Yes.
Yes,
I do.
yes, you have to pull it off a consent if someone has to comment on it.
Okay. Since I can't see any hand raised,
They saw the sign and came up, but Patty's trying to find out if they have anything to comment
She's
on.
checking out, and she's asking them now if they want to comment on item number 1.
on item number 1. Okay.
She's talking to them now?
On the signs for the public kiosk, so they got curious and came upstairs.
They probably don't want to talk about, they probably don't even know what the item is.
Exactly.
Okay, maybe we should come back at the end.
Well, I don't want to come back. Let's knock it out.
We need to find out if they're going to comment on any items. Another planet. Have Patty confirm.
Chairman, I'm going to note the proof of publication while we're waiting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Both items were published in the Tampa Bay Times on September 16, 2020.
Thank you.
Curiosity. Where's the other building? I just
I heard other building. They're over at Tammy's having chicken. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on.
Hey, Denise, this is David Goldstein. While we're waiting, is there anybody on WebEx or email for this item?
He said, is there anybody on WebEx that wants to speak on this item?
The applicant is on, but we don't have anyone in opposition to the item on WebEx or
Okay.
signed up to speak or submitted any emails to be read into the record on the item,
So we have no comment in opposition.
except we're
Okay,
waiting
okay.
on the kiosk people.
We're good to go.
Go for
Okay,
it.
so
I move to approve item number 1.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Okay.
second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote on that?
Mr. Emmett Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Getz?
Yes.
Mr. Pickens Price? Mr. Dale Maggard?
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pittman?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Philman?
Yes.
Mr. Paul Fenora?
Yes. Okay, very good.
Okay, I need you to put
Okay, item number 2.
I don't know what file it is.
It's-
Too many files.
Okay, it's the one that
Hi,
says-
this is Patty over in the East Pasco Government Center. I spoke with the residents here, and they do not wish to make any comment on this item number 1.
Where's her? Is she got a speaker somewhere? Or is it coming through this?
That's good? Yes. I don't. That's all.
Hello? Okay. As soon as he loads my PowerPoint, we can start this.
Can we? How do we hear her? There are speakers. That's
Just
coming
turn
through?
up that volume for us if you could. It was hard to hear.
Just has to unmute her side.
I'm unmuted.
And she's unmuted.
So I think I heard you say there's no comment.
Yes, the residents do not wish to make any comments on this first item.
Thank you.
That's good. That's good to know.
That's good. Okay, let's move on to item number 2.
So item P2 is there's a PowerPoint coming in 1 second. and I'll explain what we're doing. And I need this thing. Okay, great. All right. Why doesn't it turn this? Okay. Oh, I got the wrong one. Okay. Item P2. Come on, baby, let's go. What are you doing here? Okay. Text, table, and exhibit amendments to the adopted Village of Pasadena Hills financial plan to include the utility master plan, utility development fees, and related revisions. Text and figure revisions to the 2025 Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 2, Future Land Use 6, including revisions to the core reserve, the village separated provisions, and the existing development approvals. And finally, the third part of that component is text and exhibit revisions to Chapter 602, J. Ben Harold, Villages of Pasadena Hills Stewardship District, related to the utility master plan, development fees, and POG credits. It was advertised?
Yeah, she already did the advertising.
Oh, she's okay.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so here you have, everyone knows the map of VOPH. Throw that in there. Okay, what I'm trying to do here today is really give you the order of presentations, because there are some things that are much more detailed oriented, and then there are some things that are just general. So if we look at this slide right now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the comprehensive plan amendment, CPAL 20-08. And there are things that are going to be talked about: the consistency with the comp plan, which allows you guys the freedom to say, yes, this makes sense. The core reserve, which will be a discussion between the property owners group proposals, and Keith Wiley's the Park National Resource will be speaking about that as well. There's an issue of the village separators I have to bring up, and then there's finally the effect of development approvals. So those 4 items that are bullet points are part of the revisions to the comprehensive plan amendment, okay? We'll cover that first. It's the most intense, not saying intense, but it's the most detailed issue that we have to get in today. After that's done, we'll go to the VOPH financial plan revisions, and the proposed master utility plan is actually an exhibit within the financial plan. If you remember, the board approved on May 5th the financial plan. It didn't have any utility surcharges or anything about the master utility plan. That was in phase 2, which is what we're covering today. And finally, number 3 item is the text revisions in the Land Development Code Stewardship Ordinance, and it's only for consistency. When we make changes to the comp plan and the financial plan, we have to make sure that there's no inconsistencies in the stewardship ordinance.
Ernie,
Yes.
on item 1, will we be taking those up, voting, or
You have to
discussing
vote.
recommendations on all 4 of those items one at a time, or is it a blanket?
Give me a second here. I'm going to show you in a second. It's on a slide here. Okay. For the comprehensive plan amendment, you have to have a roll call vote to accept the POG revisions, or accept the park and natural resources revisions, or a compromise between the two. So that's a real vote.
Do it collectively as a group of 4, or do you want us to do it one at a time?
Well, I think at the end, I think you should have the discussion on the core reserve, and then collectively make a decision, and then we table that to the very end of the presentations, and then make one vote that just says,
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so let me go back a second here. Okay, so just in terms of comp plan consistency, which is important, the following policies are consistent. It's policy flu 6.2, natural resource protection. And these are our comments from planning. The field surveys will help identify the significant habitats. Core expander shrinks depending upon the accurate up-to-date data. For some reason, it's cut off. Landowners have to calculate the size and boundaries of the core reserve on their land. So anyway, the point is that particular red line revisions are still consistent with what we're doing in terms of the comp plan consistency. And then finally, the conservation framework. The highest concentration of environmentally sensitive land is located within regionally significant environmental features, the core reserve, the ecological buffer zones. To protect these lands, extend outward from the core. Again, this is still consistency. We are modifying certain pieces of things, but they are still in general consistent with the comp plan. So that just lays the foundation. Here are the 3 choices you have once we talk about the core reserve. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Pat Gassaway, who's up there and is going to give a presentation. And then Keith Wiley will follow that. I know Keith is here as well. And just listen to the presentation, ask the questions, and then make a discussion among yourself. Take any input that's coming from outside, and then we'll go from there. Okay? Then we'll hit the next topics.
Okay, thank you.
So you need to
Let me ask you real quick. The people that you have stashed in the other room, do they want to comment on this part of it?
That's Patty. Patty, can you hear me? Patty? Can you plug in Patty?
Hi, sorry. No, they will not be speaking on this either.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We got it.
So load Pat Gasaway's,
I don't know. Something we missed? Page 5?
They want to comment on how well you run this.
We are not taking open.
They just want to thank you.
That is not an open forum. I'm telling you that right now. It's not an open forum.
We can't discuss it, or
No. Some things you just push down in the bottom, and you know.
I think that's why they're here, though. I really do.
Okay.
God, I hope not.
In the other building.
So we are loading Pat's slide presentation right this minute. Pat, can you hear us?
I can, Ernie. Thank you.
Okay.
We can't hear him.
Ernie, you got anything? Can you pump up the volume at all? I mean, what do you got?
It was hard to hear Pat.
I think it's maximized, is it?
I think it's the
bulletproof glass.
that's exactly.
Okay. Let me just ask Pat if he can see what this says. Pat, can you see the screen? Wow. Can you see the screen?
I can.
Okay. So you will have to tell us when to shift the slides probably, okay?
All right, great. This is Pat Gasaway. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today about the changes that we've had proposed for Pasadena Hills. If we could go to the first slide. Great. When we had originally started this back in 2020, the goals were to create a more level playing field for Pasadena Hills by removing some of the big negative market factors, primarily the excessive development fees driven by surcharges, as well as the mandatory T&D form of development. In pursuit of that, trying to make this regulatory framework more market friendly, we had some other things to revise and update in the various documents. If we could go to the next slide. We needed to create a utility surcharge for water and wastewater transmission lines, as well as modifying the core reserve definition, clarifying the village separator definitions, creating an existing development approval policy. The update of the transportation surcharge was necessary following the countywide mobility fee update. So in the time intervening from May until now, we've had an adjustment in some mobility fees, and that has a corresponding effect on the surcharge calculation that we're making. Might as well clean that up now while we have the hood up. And then we wanted to update the property owner group's credits by virtue of the planning efforts that they have funded on behalf of Pasco County. Let's see, if we go to the next slide, please. In the comprehensive plan, three basic things that need to be tackled. First, modifying the core reserve definition. Second is clarifying the village separator definition. And then third, creating policy to ensure that the existing development approvals that have gone on before this update will conform with these updated documents. We could go to the next slide, please. In the comprehensive plan, there is language that identifies an item called the core reserve. The core reserve is intended to amplify the protection of the Class 1 wetlands. This current language allows a level of protection that does not exist anywhere else in Pasco County without compensation. So anywhere where you have a greater level of protection to Class 1 wetlands, elsewhere in the county is then required to purchase those uplands that protect the Class 1 wetlands. The current policy requires an unlimited preservation of the adjacent native habitat, even potentially far beyond the limits of what a single property owner may own. That will obviously make planning difficult because a property owner adjacent to another that is affected might not understand that they are affected. The current owners of these native habitat areas adjacent to Category 1s are under no obligation during their agricultural pursuits to preserve or protect those native habitats. And so the notion that that what exists today might not exist in the future is a very real possibility. When you look at our proposed revised language to the core reserve, it in essence limits to a 100-foot maximum the amount of native upland habitat that would be protected along with the limits of the Category 1 wetlands. There's also a circumstance where adjacent to Category 1 wetlands there may be no native upland habitat at all. And in that regard, we would then go back to the 25-foot wetland buffer that is consistent with the remainder of the county. In the map that you see in the bottom right corner, I realize it's probably small, but in the next slide, if we go to that, we'll see a blow up of that slide. So figure 3, when it's a little bit larger.
Hold on, Pat. We're waiting for that next slide.
Cool. There you go. Kind of hard to see here, but the perimeter of Pasadena Hills is shown there in purple. And you see there are a few areas of significant uplands adjacent to Class 1 wetlands shown kind of in the south and central and northern portions of the west half of the boundary of Pasadena Hills. There are a few others located adjacent to the countryside line up in the north and northeast portions of the boundary. If we go to the next slide, we can see strike through and underline of our proposed language compared to the currently adopted language for the core reserve. One of the things that we are changing here is the 100-year floodplain was previously a component of the criteria for establishing the limits. The Land Development Code has a significant amount of current code that regulates the proper development of the floodplain. And so we sought to simplify here, make it more market friendly, and eliminate that redundant floodplain constraint here. When we look further, we see that we're clearing up some language here and specifying the Category 1 wetland systems as being the basis for adjacency of these areas for protection. And then in the final paragraph there, you can see that the minimum buffer dimensions here are being, a minimum of 25 feet, where there is no naturally native upland habitat adjacent to those Class 1 wetlands. So if we'll go to the next slide, the strike through continues to define the native upland habitats having adjacency to what we call land use and cover classification system items 300s and 400s in the GIS mapping. The users of this overlay would be able to take that documentation and find out what portions of that property are adjacent to the Category 1 wetlands, and this portion of the language would define the core reserve as that portion of those native upland habitats within 100 feet of the edge of those Category 1 wetlands. It also deletes the floodplain, also deletes the Category 2 and the Category 3 wetlands contiguous to those floodplains. This clearly says that when we are in a circumstance where there is no native upland habitat, that the 25-foot minimum buffer would apply. The final paragraph, the bottom, also increases here the verbiage to be able to say that the boundaries, may be revised on the figure that we saw previously, with the more accurate site-specific studies that would logically come at the points in the development process where the preliminary site plan or preliminary development plan approvals are pursued by the development community. Okay, if we'll go to the next slide. The final modification for the core reserve language is to clarify some uses that are allowable within those core reserve areas. Previously, we had public or private parks and trails and wetland mitigation. Because we have many floodplain mitigation areas that are also planted to create wetland mitigation, we included that language here. We also reflected that local and collector roads within the core reserve could also have the associated stormwater management facilities that are required for those collector roads and local roads. We clarified here that the intent of the policy was to minimize the conversion of significant native habitat where practical. And at the policy, at the committee's discretion, I'll be happy to pause there at the end of this discussion for core reserve. If they wanted to discuss the matter, ask any questions in order to arrive at a recommendation before we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Pat. At this time, does, I presume, Keith want to make a statement?
Yeah. Keith, are you there?
Yeah, Ari, I'm here. How you doing?
Do you have a slide presentation, or are you going to just talk?
No, I just emailed it to John. He's going to be loading it up here in a little bit.
Okay, so John will present the slideshow, and then Keith will talk. We'll have to wait a few minutes while it's loaded. Okay.
So I'll just do a quick introduction. So Keith Wiley, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources. If I would have remembered this was in Dade City, I would have just drove over real quick. I'm thinking I should probably be there in person, so I apologize. Couple quick points. John, if you can start us on slide 8, that'd be fine. It's not something new. This is an existing policy, in the sub area group for VOPH. So nothing new that my team is proposing that Mr. Gassaway described. Another high level point here is that really the intent really wasn't wetland protection. The focus was ultimately to protect regionally significant systems within the VOPH boundary. And as far as the acquisition piece goes, that wasn't something I think Mr. Gassaway had mentioned that in other portions of the county that protections like this don't exist unless the county is pursuing to acquire them. Though that may be true, the acquisitions of said uplands next to the wetland systems was not contemplated. And again, this is something that we inherited that we're discussing. We've met multiple times with Mr. Gassaway and others, and we're just trying to ultimately really present the facts to the committee and also to the BCC of what's being proposed. So I have Melissa Charbonneau is on the line. What she's going to do, she's going to walk through the specific sections where we propose some language. I wish we would have been able to have a comparison next to each other. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But I'm going to turn it over to Melissa now so she can just call out what we propose in terms of changes. And I'd also like to remind the group that in the initial meeting, that my team did come to a concession to not necessarily expand. We basically locked down the map that's depicted in the plan. There were some questions of if flood maps change and FEMA lines change, would we increase these areas with the changing of maps, which obviously would be a very significant impact to the property owner. We agree that we would stick to the baseline map, and I think that language is actually on the slide right here. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and let Melissa take over from here, and then I'll be available for discussion.
Keith sent you one? Okay, so whatever Keith sent you. This looks like mine. Dave used mine. I don't know.
No, this is the correct presentation.
Correct one.
So who is it speaking now?
This is Melissa Charbonneau with Parks, Rec, and Natural Resources.
Okay, okay.
Okay, can you go back to the last slide, please? Thank you. So one of the things that Keith just discussed was the 100-year floodplain that is within the core reserve. And we agreed that those maps would not change as the floodplain maps are updated. They would stay the same with the existing approved figure number 3. Next slide, please. All right, we added a little bit more language to clarify the certain types of land uses and naturally vegetated uplands that would be included within the core reserve. Those would be looked at with each submittal of a site plan or an MPUD, and then they would include all the areas, even disturbed areas that could still be restored, because these areas, even though they might be disturbed, they can still be restored to natural functioning native habitats. So those areas would be determined by staff or a designee. And areas that would be excluded are the areas that are already bona fide agricultural activities. Next slide, please. On this section, we added a little bit of information discussing this would be reviewed at site plan and or zoning application, each individual site within VOPH. Next slide, please. And then we also added more allowable uses within the core reserve, where there's areas that are not naturally vegetated or native uplands. We could include stormwater uses and floodplain management systems. Next slide, please. And that's it. Those were all of staff's changes.
So I think, Mel, I'll hop in real quick. So I think, again, this is Keith Wiley. I think the takeaway is that, you know, the policy recommended, or the intent of the policy, the original policy, was that at some point in time, these areas could be modified at the request of an applicant. So understand that doing that at this stage of the game would be a lot of work, cost a lot of money. So we were open, team was open to kicking the can on that to site plan. We also, as Melissa pointed out, we added some allowable uses that historically would not be allowed. And I don't know how we get to a point. I don't think we understood that we were presenting language for consideration, because all we really see at this point is, and this is confusing to us because I feel like it's a staff initiated change, but I guess I would say the applicant's language. I would like us to, I would really request more time so we can get to some language that we can agree upon.
Okay, Keith, is that your presentation? Are you finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Any, Pat, do you have anything you'd like to add or challenge or comment to what Keith was saying before we go into discussion?
At this point, happy to answer any questions you might have. We did meet with Keith and Melissa and discuss the impacts. The understanding that the goal was to make these modifications to arrive at a more market-friendly circumstance for the development potential of these 13 villages was the goal. The goal wasn't to retain the language that we already had. The suggestion here that we've proposed is to simply add a couple of things to avoid the redundancy of the floodplain within these core reserves. They're already regulated. And further, to specify a limitation that we feel is reasonable at achieving a substantive percentage of the native upland habitats adjacent to the Category 1 wetlands. The indiscriminate and unlimited preservation of that habitat type, we feel is unwieldy, we feel is overreaching, and we feel that this sets up property owners in the future who feel that they've been adversely affected by this taking of land without compensation. So we feel these things are necessary changes to achieve the goal of making these words more market friendly for Pasadena Hills and avoid a competitive disadvantage.
Chairman, I request an opportunity to respond. This is Keith Wiley.
Certainly, Keith, what would you like to say?
So I just want to be clear that the proposed language, at least that Mr. Gasaway presented, would result in a significant reduction. If we can get that map back up, I forget which slide it was, John, but it does propose a significant reduction of the areas that were intended to be protected in the original policy. So when the committee makes their recommendation, I want that to be clear. I think when we calculated the acreage reduction, it was, Pat, do you have that number? I don't want to put out a number that's incorrect, but do you know what the acreage reduction is?
See it on the thing.
Frankly, Keith, this is Pat Gasaway. I don't recall the percentage of reduction that that the 100 foot made within the entirety of VOPH.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Well, the number I remember was like 800 acres, but I don't know if that was from the original proposal, your original language, or the 100 feet foot buffer. So I just want the committee to understand what this really means. You go having a significant open space element in your plan to basically standard LDC requirements of what you would have anywhere else in the county. So it eliminates the potential uniqueness of this area county.
Okay.
And that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Keith.
Mr. Chairman, this is Joel to the Land Use Council for the Property Owners Group. May I have a moment to respond?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Pat has been pretty gentle about this, but I know from our clients, the property owner group members, that I think a little historical perspective is helpful here. I understand Keith's point that this modification would take away some developable upland acreage that conceptually was restricted on the initial approval. But I guess my point is, let's just assume the amount of land that is removed from that restriction is, say, 800 acres. Look at the flip side of that. Can you imagine 800 of a property owner's developable upland acres being taken by the county without any compensation for that land? Back to Pat's point, this is not done anywhere else in Pasco County. The board has adopted an eco-corridor ordinance now where if they have an ecologically significant area, particularly uplands bordering wetlands, they negotiate and or get appraised value and pay for that land. So rather than saying VOPH is something that's unique that justifies the taking of 800 or 1,000 acres of land without any compensation to those landowners, I think the fair question is, why is that the case? We all know from the original history that this plan was somewhat foisted upon the property owners group by the prior administration and the consultant who did the plan. And the simple fact is, no one had much of a choice. If there was going to be any approval or any progress, then this was simply an exaction that was taken. But I submit that the fact that it was done doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it fair. And in particular, when the directive that we were given conceptually by the county commission was to try to, quote, level the playing field as much as reasonable between VOPH and other areas. This is the poster child for what is not competitive and what is not a level playing field. So I frankly think the proposal from the POG that possibly we could live with a 100-foot buffer when it's only 25 feet elsewhere, I frankly think that is overly generous. The real question is, why is there any requirement beyond 25 feet unless there's going to be compensation? So that's all I have to offer in response is I think this is a major issue. I think it is a fairness and an equity issue. The mere fact that, think about the fact that floodplain, which is already regulated, as Pat said, think about the fact that that's included in there. Floodplain in and of itself is not ecologically significant. Just being floodplain doesn't make something ecologically significant. So why is the county taking that under the thinly veiled guise of protecting ecology when it has nothing to do with ecology? So I think the committee, should, respectfully take a look at this, probe, and investigate the pros and cons of this. That's all the property owners group is suggesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Before we get started, before the committee talks, am I correct to assume that everybody else in that other building has no comment on this?
I wonder if the planning director may have a comment. Terry, can you hear me? Because he wanted to be a panel. I think he wanted to say something, but I texted him now. He didn't say yes.
Ernie and Paul, Mr. Chairman, this is Clark Hobby. If I might have a brief moment, I have a comment myself.
Yes, go ahead, Clark.
Just wanted to point out, I'm in agreement with the property owners group, what the language they're putting forward, and I think it's really reasonable, and I understand and agree with what Joel and Pat are saying. There is one point of clarification. I think it's for everyone's benefit. In the language, and I'm looking at the red line on page 2-119 at the bottom of section 1, where Pat's language talks about the revisions based on site-specific studies. I do think it's very important to all the property owners that those site-specific studies be initiated by the applicant developer, because we do not want to open the door to allow for a third party, for instance, to try to create a study that could result in additional core reserve areas that the applicant may not even know about. That's my only comment on it.
So you would like to add that language
right?
That be okay.
Yeah. So it would say more accurate site-specific studies offered by the applicant developer. And I'm not wedded to the specific language, but I do think the applicant developer needs to be the one proffering the changes.
Okay.
And
Mr. Clark, let me circle back around to get that. Did you get that written down, Ernie?
Yeah, I think that was the. I think that was the intent of that. The applicant would have to submit.
Okay. Well, we know what intentions are doing today, so let's try and be specific and clean it up.
Yeah, the applicant must then submit the information if he's going to change anything on the core reserve definition. It's pretty much, it has to come from him, not from another party.
Okay, just make sure that if we're going to adopt it, that it meets that criteria.
Yeah.
Clark, can you, if you want to email that specific language in so they can.
Actually, yes. Clark,
Yes.
Clark, just text me, just email me exactly what you're saying and we'll run it by David.
I'll run it by David and Joel as well. And I believe Joel was about to chime in saying that he doesn't have an objection to it. Joel?
That's fine.
Yes, that's correct. As land use counsel for the property owners group, as Ernie said, that was the intent. We should have been more clear. So we agree with that modification.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you.
There's nobody in the kiosk that wants to speak.
Nobody in the kiosk. Okay.
Terry, did you want to say anything at all? Or David?
No, just that I want to make sure there's nobody else on WebEx that wants to make comments because Clark sort of jumped in, but is there anybody else on WebEx that wanted to make comments on this?
That's kind of what we're trying to get to right now, David. Anybody else? Raise your hand.
Well, let me ask, did anybody else register on WebEx for this item?
No, I haven't seen anybody register for the core reserve.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you, David. So we're all good. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know what that, I mean, we're all in agreement with the language is, we're trying to add to it, but we haven't seen it yet. So it's just, I think it'd be reckless to go proceed on assumption that they're going to get it right.
Well, that's what Ernie is.
What Clark suggested was a tweak to clarify what we already intended, that the applicant would actually make the initiative to say, hey, I don't like the way this border is. I hired a surveyor, I hired an environmental guy, and here's what it really should be based upon this evidence. That's going to for sure. Keith wants more time to propose, and what I understand, it's very hard to hear, but I think Keith wants more time to modify the proposal of the POG. I think, and he's worried that it's going to be significantly impacting the environmental lands that needs to be protected.
That seems to be general concession.
So that's what you have to decide on.
Any other comments, Dale? Did you?
Yeah, I got plenty.
Okay.
Couple of things. What Pat said early on about what the intention of this new redo of the original 2008 VOPH, I think is very significant. One, he was talking about it being market friendly. Two, the second thing about that is no other place in the county, he says, and I assume somebody would have said he was wrong if he was, has that, where they do that. And thirdly, I'm not even sure why VOP, us as a board, would consider anything other than what the county already has is 25 feet. I mean, why?
Without compensation.
Yeah, without compensation.
Without compensation.
I mean, why would the VOPA, I mean, this whole land group has been handcuffed for the last decade. And now we finally are in a position to try to make this as user-friendly, for lack of better words, for the landowners as possible. And now we're even saying, well, I tell you what, just because you guys are willing to talk, we'll give you 75 more feet of our property. And I just think that's wrong. I mean, if you're not going to pay me for it, whether it's my land, your land, whoever's, then that's wrong. If everybody else in the county is getting that same deal, why shouldn't the people in VOPH get that same deal? That's my whole point. And as far as kicking the can on down the road, we've done that for 12 years. I mean, I just can't imagine why we would send to the BCC anything other than what they've instructed that they want done, and to have the this market area to be as market friendly as possible. I mean, we're already going to be paying a surcharge that nobody else in the county's paying. I see no reason in why we would concede to any other land. I mean, it's just a land grab. I mean, I just don't understand it. So that's my 2 cents.
Mark?
One of the things we're just talking about here, I don't think that anybody's talking serious about getting rid of the 100-year floodplain at all. Just getting rid of the whole thing. It's the 25 to the 100 feet is what we're mainly discussing in this, the distance away from the wetlands.
Well, the way it's currently written right now, it says 100 feet.
Right.
But Dale is saying, why are we just stopping at 100 when 25 is the norm without compensation?
Right. In the county, that's
that correct, Dale?
Normal 25.
That is absolutely correct. Well, actually, the way it's written now, it's unlimited where they can go.
No, I'm saying.
But
the
what
new thing
we're
today,
proposing is 100 feet.
today,
Right.
They're proposing 100.
Right.
Okay. But what you are stating is the rest of the county is at 25. That 75 feet that we are giving up is without compensation. Why would we do that? You use the word market friendly. I use the word equitable.
Exactly.
So that's the way I was. So I don't want to step on.
No.
Okay? You good with
That's
that?
absolutely.
Okay.
That's,
Mark?
that's the point.
No, that's what it kind of sounded like as if it is the county from anywhere else is approximately 25 feet or at 25 feet. Would the wetlands then be determined from just maps, or would it be actually the site plan? Because the maps could be a little off. When you get out there and actually survey it, it could be a little different,
Yeah, I think they're going to do the surveys. I mean, if I were the landowner and it was up to me to demonstrate where that line was, I would hire the people to do it correctly. And it's not just looking on old maps from historically, you'd have to walk the property.
And that is to what Clark's point was, is that the applicant is the one who's going to hire, and they are going to make the report accordingly.
Right.
Which I would agree with what Clark stated.
Right.
Okay.
Which was our intent anyway. So.
Emmett?
No comments.
Okay. Gentlemen?
I agree with everything everybody said. We've done these surveys in the field as well, and we see that the changes that are made in the field based on current situations are a lot different than these old plans. So
okay.
I agree.
So, so as far as the core reserve is concerned, before we get to the village separator, what I would like to see the language stipulate that we move to the 25-foot mark, and that we add what Clark stated, and then send that, at least for that line item, send that to the BOCC.
I think the proposal from the POG says 25 feet.
I thought it said 100.
No.
Going from 100.
It's 25 feet. Go back and look on the comparison
It's
chart.
100 now, and they're proposing we go to the 25 feet.
That's
Yes.
the red line. Okay.
Yeah, and all we have to add now is what Clark wanted, which is a clarification that the landowner applicant has to submit the paperwork necessary to prove where the line is.
Let's clarify that with Joel and Pat. On
Okay.
that. I think POC's position is to 100 feet.
That's what I thought it was.
Right. And what I'm proposing, or what hopefully we're proposing, is it just goes back to the. All I'm saying is the same thing
Make
as what
sure it's
everywhere else in
25.
the county is.
Yeah. Joel or Pat, can you show us where it stipulates the 100 and or the 25-foot line?
Yeah, this is Joel. I don't have control of the document, but I know the proposed draft for discussion, it included, if there were adjacent vegetated uplands, it included the 100-foot buffer. So that 100-foot item would have to be reduced to 25 feet if the committee is inclined to recommend only the 25-foot buffer.
Yes, I think that's where we want to land. We want to be where everybody else is, unless the county wants to start writing checks.
That's exactly
Yes.
right.
Then this proposed language would change from 100 feet to 25 feet.
Okay.
And Ernie, this is Pat Gasaway. If you go to my slideshow, I can direct you to the location where the language change would be required.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to go switch to your ad so we can see clearly what the statement says on the slide, at least. So.
Well, I highlighted it up top there.
Yeah. Well, it says 100 or 25.
If it's not, if it's not
with that condition.
right. Right. And really, all you want is what the county's giving you.
Are we looking for? Are we waiting on something?
Yes, we're going to Pat's slide where the line says specifically what has to be modified or what doesn't need to be modified.
Okay, thank you.
Page 7, maybe. A in the top left. 25.
Keep going. Keep going. It's the red. You'll see red lines, I think, and then okay. Blow that up. Is it possible to blow that up?
One more. Yeah, one more.
One more.
So you got. No, sorry. One.
Back. Go back 2.
There you go. So you see under paragraph A, where it says within 100 feet of the category 1 wetland limits, We need to change that 100 feet to 25 feet.
45?
25.
25.
Pat, what I would like to do, just so that number does not seem arbitrarious,
That's close enough.
okay, aboriginal.
Equitable. That's
No, I want to, and the rest of that sentence should also state that is equal with the rest of the county. Okay, so in other words, if someone were to look at that, they wouldn't think that it's just for VOPH, but that is the standard within the county. Can you finish off that sentence? Would that make a difference or not?
It's up to the committee. I think either one is sufficient.
We want to reflect what the county standard is now.
Well,
Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for.
Chairman, this is
County
Keith.
standard.
Couldn't you just reference the
Maybe you
current
should say something like
standard?
to be consistent with county standards of 25 feet.
There you go. That's it. To be consistent with county standards of 25 feet.
Okay.
Keith trying to say something, I think.
Yeah, Keith. I know Keith doesn't know. Okay.
Keith, do you want to say something?
Well, I was gonna say, why don't you just reference the current LDC standard, because that's effectively what because the standard can change in time. So, but instead of creating, it's just redundant. I guess my point is that it should just be consistent. If what the committee is recommending, then really you're just referencing the current LDC standards underneath the wetland section.
Because if later on they change those standards, you've got to go back and redo yours.
Right.
So what he's saying is make it easier to just reference the standard that exists.
The standard currently is 25.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know. I'm not.
Well, then I just leave it at 25. We want
Okay. Well, then we'll just leave it at 25 without all the additional language.
If you wanted some, if you wanted to make up some room here, you might want to just delete the core reserve altogether.
Well, I mean, that's effectively what this recommendation does. I was going to bring that up, but that's effectively what you're, as a committee.
This is Joel. Mr. Chairman, if I can have 1 second on that.
Please.
I think obviously we could do it either way. My suggestion is, because none of this will be final until the VOCC reviews and decides what to do, I think it would be prudent to just, I think I agree with Keith's first suggestion, where it says within 100 feet, I would just say as consistent with LDC section, whatever. And that way is if the commission, the intent here is we want to be treated the same as everyone else. So if the county commission changes 25 feet to 20 feet or to 30 feet, we would go with that. We just want to be treated the same. I would be reluctant at this point to completely delete the core reserve section until we get input from VOCC and their decision. Because if they do something else, at least we will have this language tracking along. They may decide, yes, we agree with the committee recommendation, and then they may tell David and I simply, and Ernie, just to delete the core reserve section at that point of adoption. So I would be reluctant just to drop it all out right now. I think it frames the issue better to just make this change. Just my opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay, that sounds fine. Let's.
Okay.
We always wanted, the main objective was to be equal with everybody else. So leaving it as the LDC, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you go back to my slide presentation, you have the three choices of recommendation. We're not going to make a roll call vote now because we have more to plow through with the comp plan, but just so you see what the recommendation looks like. Okay, so what you see here is really what you're talking about is item number 3. You're recommending the POG with the one change, which will make the VOP line 25 feet, consistent with LDC section X, whatever that is.
And you're also going to add in that line that the
And Clark's clarification.
Clark's comment as well.
Yes,
Those two
okay.
changes.
So that's the motion you eventually want to make, okay?
Correct.
And Clark's recommended clarification. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Are you all at least okay with that discussion? We'll move on to another item?
I believe so. Mark? Yep.
We need to take.
You take a vote roll call later because I need a vote specifically on the comp plan changes, and this is only one big piece of that.
All right.
So let me allow to talk about the next issue here, which is the village separators. Okay, let me go back here. Did it too quickly. Okay, so there were changes recommended by the POG on village separators, and here's in red is the red changes. Let me just read it to you so you understand what's happening. Village separators may include wetlands, floodplain, and stormwater management systems, sidewalks, golf cart paths, alternative transportation facilities are those golf cart paths, by the way, neighborhood parks, recreational facilities, and other like uses, but no non-residential structures. The key there is the structures and the non-residential. The 150-foot village separator buffer is only required in one of the two adjacent villages for a total of 150 feet. This is very different, not 300 feet, okay? Let me go understand. This is what's being proposed. The 150-foot village separator buffer is only required in one of the two adjacent villages. Village separator buffers are not required in the village where non-residential development is adjacent to a primary or intermediate road separating two villages. In other words, where there is commercial activity, basically, okay? You don't need to put the buffer there. Village separators are not required on the boundary of a village if that boundary not is adjacent to another village. In other words, it is not on the perimeter of VOPH. It is only to separate each village from another village. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and why. Excluded properties, rural enclaves, or countryside area. Okay, so that's the actual text. Let's see the map that goes with it. You can see that in the bright pink red lines. I'll show you a map of the villages later, but right now it specifically tells you where those village separators are going to be. So it clarifies it so that there is no confusion. And then the comment is the proposed text and map above strengthens the purpose of village separators to separate villages from each other. It does not require a village to be separated from a non-VOPH boundary line. And we met with stakeholders, in particular, that had an issue with this. We walked through it. We resolved it. They were okay with that as well. Let me go now. I want to talk a little bit about now. Barbara Wilhite is not here. Unfortunately, she had another meeting she had to go to, or she had a conflict. I told her that I would mention that her proposal was to eliminate completely the village separators. I would like to address that because I think we're missing the point of a village separator. If you look at that map, you'll see when this plan was designed, it's called the Villages of Pasadena Hills. There's an S at the end of the village. Okay, it's not the village. It's not one big piece of land that's got a bunch of stuff on it. It actually is a series of independent, at least, villages that have their own town center, and the density is high in the middle and it extends outward. And then you have a little belt called this village separator that actually distinguishes each village from another. It is a way to eliminate sprawl or prevent sprawl from happening, okay? The plan itself, when you go back in history, and I wasn't here then, but looking at the plan, my background is planning as well, it's a very good plan. It's a really wise plan because what it does is it creates these separate type of villages that people can identify with, okay? It has a green space around it, and that's sort of mimicking what they did in the UK. If you ever study planning, the villages in the UK are very much like that. They've got villages that got a green belt. The green belt is wider than 150 feet though, but it has the same idea behind that, okay? And I think the designers of this, which again, won an award for this, okay, have actually created an environment called Villages of Pasadena Hills, which is very distinct from the rest of the county. I know we're trying very hard to make it marketable, and I think we are successful in that. But at the end of the day, VOPH has to have some unique properties that's going to actually create value there that people are going to say, I live in such and such village in Pasadena Hills. If you make it look just like exactly the county, we've wasted a lot of energy and a lot of good planning has gone down the drain. So I think there was a reason why a lot of these things were implemented in the villages of Pasadena Hills. Some of those say encouraging distinct villages separate from each other. And it's not just the separation that you cause from housing. Density is intense in the centers. It goes out to the outside where the housing goes from 4 to 10. There's usually a road, but if you also use green space as a way of separating and adding distinctions. It uses landscape elements. I'll show you the next slide about how we have been very generous in offering kinds of land uses that can be put in those separators. It discourages suburban sprawl, and I think this is a key here. If you remove these things, you're going to get sprawl, and I don't know if you really want that to happen in VOPH, because then it's going to look like everywhere else, except for maybe there's some village centers in place. It was an award-winning design because it was innovative at the time. It's retaining the desired character, which is what the original people who wanted this put in place, something a little bit different. There was a reason why they didn't put 4-lane highways through the place. They wanted local roads. They wanted to retain this character of a country-type atmosphere. Better plans yield higher value in the marketplace. That's really important. And you see that if you do comp statistics, and I've worked in a lot of master plans, I worked in real estate development, you see that as well. When a plan is well designed, people will pay more. The value is there. Okay, you have to give up some things, okay? But at the end of the day, you can still retain really tremendous value by keeping to the plan. And it keeps VOPH unique in the competitive nature of real estate. So for a lot of reasons, those village separators, I know we've modified them. Okay, I understand why, and we can do that. But to remove them completely, I'm sorry, I don't think the planning department will support that. I don't think that's a wise thing to do. I can have Terry's on board here. He can speak to this as well. He's the head of the planning department director. So here's an example of the uses that you're allowed. You can see it's still green. You can still have things in there, but they create the sense of a distinction. Here's where the next village starts beyond that. You drive by, you see kids playing. You don't drive by and you just see another subdivision of houses. That's valuable. Okay, I wouldn't be so quick to just dismiss what Barbara and maybe a few others may decide, oh, this is different from the rest of the county. Yes, it is different. Yes. Is it worth it? The question really has to be asked is, do I want VOPH to stand out and be a little bit more superior in terms of design? That's your decision, okay? So I told Barbara that I was going to talk about that, and I did. I turn it over to you guys.
Is there anybody else in waiting in the wings or anywhere that want to talk about this, Ernie?
No, not in the kiosk.
Okay.
I think they're going now.
Or anything? I want to make sure.
And Barbara's not here, so
not here.
no one else has said anything to me about this except for Barbara.
Okay.
So what is the recommended,
Just leave it the way that the POG.
is that what's POG?
The POG came back and said, and pretty much modified it. Let me go back a second to what they said. In red is theirs.
Right.
Remember, it was 300 feet. Now it's 150 on one side. Now there are more uses that you can put in it that still creates the separation.
So it's a modification.
It's a modification, and it's practical. You know, I mean, I think in the end of the day, this is okay. You know, that's just my opinion.
I hear you saying that you support the POGs.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
Okay, all right, that's what I was.
Because it still retains, the most important is it still retains the unique distinctions among the villages. And I think it's a really good thing.
More of the uses.
Right. But anyway, but you guys have to decide that.
No, I'm just.
Yeah.
Appreciate
you. Threw me off with the separation or the elimination one, so I didn't know that was a possibility. It was a proposal, so.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, this 150 foot, and it, as I'm reading it, 150 foot separator only between two different villages.
Yes.
Are we taking 75 from each side?
That's all going to be in the MPD stage. Sometimes I'm sure there's some land that it makes more sense. If you've got wetland issues and things like that, wouldn't you want to take that and make that as your buffer? It really depends on, I think, on a case by case who comes in. And I think right now there have been already been buffers or separators already. We may want to rethink that as well.
Well,
you don't want to just draw a line. You really want to look at the land and make sure it makes sense.
So this is one of my concerns, and it falls back to what Dale stated earlier, and that is giving up or taking land uncompensatable that at the end of the day is someone's going to lose value in something or another.
Unless you can't develop it on anyway.
Unless
floodplain, wetland, category 1.
I totally agree. And so when you had mentioned that it's on a case by case scenario, which I would agree is fine. So, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is the first guy in. Is he going to push all that buffer onto somebody else?
Maybe this is a legal issue. Maybe I need to hear from David or from.
Well, first of all, I have to somewhat disagree with the chairman's statement. This is taking land without compensation. This is really, first of all, the county wouldn't own this land, just to be clear. And if you look at the list of what's allowed in this village separator area. It includes neighborhood parks, which is required in the land development code anyway. So I'm not sure that this is going to be materially different than what's required elsewhere in the county. It's encouraging people to put some of their recreational areas in the village separator area. So it's things that would have already been required elsewhere in the code. It's encouraging to put them in the village separator as opposed to somewhere else in your project. So I don't know that it's really adding a lot more requirements than what exists elsewhere in the county. But to answer the specific question, I do agree with Ernie that it's hard to come up with a rule to say that each side has to do 75 feet because, right, what if one of them already, has 150 feet of wetlands? Why would the other one need to put an additional 75?
Totally agree, David. But the only thing that is a concern, and I agree with you. I mean, it's not wasted space. There are things that can go in there, and a good land planner will do that. One of the things that concerns me, and that was my original point, is the first guy in. Is he going to be able to, get an unfair advantage over the guy next to him because of the way it's set up?
Possibly.
Okay.
Wait, that's what it is now.
Okay, I would say
stuff on commercial pieces. First guy in can grab as much as he wants, unless some people.
Let me answer that question. Yeah. So remember, all of these MPDs come to you for recommendations. So the adjacent property owner gets notified of all these MPDs. So if either the committee or the adjacent property owner thinks that the MPD is not providing enough open space and the adjacent property owner is going to have to provide more, they can comment on that. I mean, So I think there's an opportunity through the MPD process. You're going to see these. The adjacent property owners are going to see these. And so I think if anybody's treated unfairly, you all can resolve that through the MPD process.
That's that's what I was looking for, is being treated unfairly. Ernie, we just did a consent on an MPUD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We didn't really look at where all this stuff laid out. So we are under the assumption and the impression that the staff is going to be equitable in how they divvy up the green space.
Yes, and the reason why things are on consent is because nobody from outside or adjacent or anybody else said, hey, stop, there's something wrong with this plan. If even one person had an issue with it, it would be moved from consent to regular.
To be clear, though, I think the one that was on your agenda today didn't have a village separator because it was on the edge. It was next to an affiliated property. Is that right, Ernie?
So maybe that one wasn't the right analogy. Right. But do you see where I'm coming from?
Yes. I tell you, the current planners that are in current planning right now, they do look at things, they look at adjacent land uses. Common sense does prevail. They're not going to mess up with somebody. If they see that the opposite land is undeveloped and there's a huge wetland that stretches for 100 miles, I think it's pretty obvious where you're going to put that village separator.
Okay.
And I'll remind them, but I don't need to remind them, but they will.
The thing, Ernie, is, yes, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you as a landowner.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, people get old, things get transferred without. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to try and make it idiot-proof, but we just don't want to take advantage. I think it'd be a bad precedent that we allow for that to take place. That's not who we are.
Responsible for themselves. We can't take care of other people.
I'm not saying I just said that. I said that we are not the police ground. Okay, but I also don't want it. I don't want there to be a bully in the room. Mm-hmm. That's all.
No, it's good.
Dale, you have a comment?
Yeah, Ernie, let me ask something. Go back to the map with the pink. I got a pig out there.
Oh wait, hang on. Let me go back. Okay, these are the roads. No, actually, I'm sorry. These are the separators between villages. So in the center of villages, where you see that pink line, that means there is a village touching that pink line.
So my question is, for lack of better terminology, the winners and losers in this 150-foot buffer are already picked, meaning that these lines are already drawn. All those pink lines is were VOPH has to have a 150-foot buffer. Is that correct?
Yes, but you have to remember, these are loosening some of the things from 300 to 150, and many of these village separators are already part of their MPUDs, okay? The winners in this, and again, this is a clarification. The issue became, how do we interpret the text? Does the text mean that we have to have a village separator on the perimeter of VOPH borders? That was what the issue was. And so we had to say, no, it actually was intended to separate one village from another village. Once the border on VOPH is here, you already have distinct land uses and issues going on across the street. Okay? So that's why this is what drove this. It was really a clarification of that, plus a reduction in requirements to make this a little bit more practical for landowners.
Let me ask you this question too, and I appreciate totally what you were saying about the ability to make VOPH stand out, as a different type of property owner, development, et cetera, et cetera. Anywhere else in the county do we have this type of separation?
No, there is none in the county that I know of.
Yep. When we started this process, we did this all voluntarily. We got extremely much more density than we've ever had. This was all very rural type stuff. And that was part of the plan to create villages. We had multiple public studies to determine where the villages would be, and they were much higher density. And that was part of it. So along the edge, if someone happens to be, that was part of the give and trade when we started this whole process to have this separation, have these walking trails and greenways to separate the higher density areas.
Well, I understand that totally, but we did that because it was basically a one-gun fight. I mean, it wasn't.
We when there was some ammo. We also nowhere else in the county also has a 40-year built-in zoning either. So.
Well, that's true, but I think most of the developers you talk to really discard that because they don't really care, because their whole deal is they're going to come in, do an absorption rate, and build out within 15 to 20 years, so they could care less whether they got a 40-year plan or not. And so I understand that caveat, and I appreciate that caveat. But my point is, if we had not had 2008, this would never even probably be a discussion in the county. But nobody had a choice back then. I mean, that's the real truth of the matter, is nobody really had a choice. And I'm not saying it's wrong now, but what I'm saying is that if we're trying to make this, again, back to, as Paul said, equitable with the rest of the county, I think it takes some consideration. I mean, 150-foot buffer, if you happen to be the person that's taken from their land and you're not getting compensated for it, that's a lot of dollars. How are you getting compensated for it?
Unless you happen to own that 150 strip and that's all you own, you have tremendous density than what you have probably existed before if you take advantage of it.
Well, we don't have the same density as they're getting at Connect City now. And Connect City's 2 miles from us.
Right out, we're on certain places we do. That's the beauty of the plan. I mean, some places there's 20 units per acre and some are 12 units per acre.
Yeah. This plan is unique in Pasco County, and honestly, it's a much better plan than what I've seen in Pasco County. It is definitely a better, well thought out plan. So if you want to make it like everybody else, you're going to get small.
I don't want to be like the rest of the county. I mean, we have a lot of advantages and things that gave us and traded for this. So I tried to go the original route and got shut down on just trying to get 1 unit per acre across this stuff. And
so, Ernie, if I'm correct, in the way I remember it, when you get the two villages together, okay, as they get closer to touching one another, they're at 1 to 5, 1 to 10.
Well, the range in villages is 4 to 10, and then it reduces, right?
I mean, when you get to the outside end,
it's a reduction of density. It depends, and again, a lot of it depends on what's the physical case by case study. But yes, there is a transient sort of like a reduction as you go away, and the green space with recreational uses, et cetera, is, again, it makes sure that transition between densities is really clear.
So if to Dale's point, and I totally agree, and I totally accept it, and I certainly understand what Emmett is saying. I think what is a concern for me is that I don't like things that don't allow for opportunity for adjustment. I guess that's what I'm saying. Okay, and if it is actually stated you have to have exactly 150 feet, okay, in the buffer, and you run into a situation where 100 foot is great.
Well, then you would assume that the person across the street can pull the 25 or whatever it's needed to make up for it.
I don't think I'm saying this right.
If it says the village separator is 150 feet, the decision has to be made as well. Is it 75? Is it 100? Is it 50? And that is a case by case situation.
Yeah, but what if 150 doesn't work, but 120 works, and that gives you just as well?
Well, then 30 feet would have to be made up on across the street.
I mean, collectively.
Well, it's defined 150 feet. If you're trying to change it in wishy-washy and make it 75 some places, 150, 125, then
the concept, the theory of a village separator, I'm 100% supportive. It's the exact number of 150 that in some cases are probably fine. You could probably actually maybe get 200, but in other areas, maybe 120 is sufficient. But if it says 150, then that's what I'm talking about.
Well, they can go before you guys, and you could say, no, we don't like what you've done, and we're going to give it to this way, and do it. I mean,
Okay, Ernie, I'm not sure that's right. Yeah, Ernie, can I just weigh in on that? Unless you put some, because this is in the comp plan, right? It's not in the LDC. Okay.
Yes, comp plan.
So if that's your intent, is that somebody can seek an alternative standard at the time of MPUD, you need to probably put some language in the comp plan that says that. Otherwise, you can't get an alternative standard from what's in the comp plan. So if you want to give somebody the ability to do something, propose something different than the 150, you probably need some language in the comp plan that says that.
So I think that's your point.
If that's the intent, you would need to say something like, unless otherwise approved at the time of MPUD approval through an alternative standard request. You would have to add that language to the comp plan.
Yeah, David, that's kind of where I'm going with it. I mean, I just don't want to separate.
David, this is Pat Gasway. Just wanted to add a couple of bits of clarification here Ernie, you're doing a great job. Just stand back from the mic a little bit so that we can understand you. Second thing is, David, there is language on the mapping that reflects that the Policy and Planning Committee can hear a request for an alternative location for these. If you look at the map in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a paragraph that gives some additional clarity there. The reason that we wanted to provide some flexibility here is because those village boundaries were arbitrary from the inception and the original adoption of the VOPH overlay. Some of those locations are very handy in the middle of a lake, in the middle of a big wetland, and they make great sense. There are some that are arbitrary and simply run along a property line. Sometimes those parcel lines may be in a location where an owner owns both sides, so it's actually coming out of the middle of their property. The idea that the language allows for existing wetlands and open spaces that are already necessary in the rest of the land development code as it applies to VOPH can be cobbled together to create a preferred alternative to the arbitrary locations shown on this map. It is a viable alternative here. That language exists on the map and is one of the things that we think is going to be a good addition to the otherwise occasionally arbitrary locations of these parcel boundaries between villages.
Okay, so Pat, let me just respond. I think the language that you cited works, but I'm not sure it fully meets the chairman's intent. I think if you said any request to deviate from the buffer locations or widths, if you added or widths, I think that would address the chairman's comment.
Okay.
And this is Joel. I agree with David, whether it's in the text or whether it's on the map. I think you need to have alt standard flexibility for both.
Yeah,
Because
I agree.
otherwise,
Flexibility was the key word, Joel.
okay.
Okay.
What I'm saying is I think the process that Pat outlined in that note is fine. It's similar to our alternative standard process. It just that it doesn't clearly allow you to deviate from the widths. And so I think you would need to add more widths after the word locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 And on that map.
The POG would support that modification.
Okay.
Got it.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay.
You guys
any
are
other
okay with all
comments
this?
from the board on this? Dale?
Accept that language.
You good?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'll just mention, I don't think that here and today is the time to take it up, but we're talking about all these other widths and the village separators and so forth. The rural enclave buffer, perhaps in the future, is something we should take a look at if we're.
Well, now we got some flexibility in that to do that. So, okay. Okay, Ernie?
Okay, so I'm going to keep going. We'll get through the comp plan at least. Hang on. Okay, finally, this part was actually in the ordinance. We felt strongly, though, we wanted to actually put it in the comp plans. I'm going to read it to you. In red is the additional clarification. Applicability and effect on existing development approvals, because there's been many approvals previously, and now we have new regulations in place. The VOPH comprehensive plan amendments to Chapter 2 shall apply both prospectively and retroactively to existing MPUDs already approved in VOPH. On May 5th, 2020, the BCC delegated authority to the county administrator or his designee to administratively amend any and all existing VOPH MPUDs in order to conform to these amendments and this is the key, without the necessity of an MPUD amendment application or application fee, okay? After notice to the affected VOPH MPUD owner, such administrative amendments may occur at the time of the first preliminary site plan, preliminary development plan approval for the applicable VOPH MPUD under review. So what that does is we're not charging anybody from the past. We want consistency. You may have gotten your MPUD approval form. Maybe now you got to tweak it a little bit when you go for the site plan. And that way, each of these villages have the same standards across the board.
Very good.
Okay.
So Ernie?
Notice?
Yeah, David?
Well, we got a comment to this language from Barbara Wilhite, and I realized she's not on.
Yes.
She wanted, after the end of the first sentence, she wanted to add in parentheses, except for excluded projects. And both Joel and I agree that change would be helpful.
Yes. So we're going to add that. That came in last minute. I got the email, and yes, thank you, David. Yes. Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, it's Joel.
Yes, Joel.
Thank you. Yeah, just to echo what David said, the POG agrees with that change. The intent here obviously is to apply to the VOPH MPUDs that have already been approved previously. And in my view, for the POG, this is actually to the property owner's benefit, because the last thing we want to have to do, let's say someone has a core reserve requirement or village separator requirement or some other approval that they now can take advantage of these amendments. We don't want to have to file an application, go through public hearings just to conform those MPUDs to these more advantageous provisions. So this will allow staff to do that administratively, even if it's not done until you go in for a development plan. So it really is to the benefit of the POG group, in my opinion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question.
Thank you, Joel.
Will there be any notice on this? Let's say somebody already has their MPUD zoning or their MPUD done. They seek to administratively change it. It could affect a neighbor next door. For an example, they may have approved 0 feet of this, possibly 150, and then it gets changed to something different. So will the neighboring landowners be noticed of this administrative, that someone's seeking an administrative change? I would think they need to be, otherwise inequitable things could
happen. Yeah, but I agree. When they go and you actually make an application, then your neighbors are notified. But in this case, it's administratively. I will talk to Brad in current planning and make sure that that's a policy, to notify the neighbors when anyone goes when they do that administrative thing.
Yeah,
So let me add to that as well. My understanding from Brad is he's not going to do this at all until somebody comes in with a site plan approval. So, and there is notice required for those site plan approvals. So I think that Brad can add, as part of Brad and the applicant, when they do the site plan submission, can add notice the administrative amendment to the MPUD as well.
Yeah. Okay. Then that'll
So
protect.
does
That will
mean
protect them. Yes. The neighbor.
Effectively, is that county policy then that the administrator or his designee not be able to hear one of these things and until and unless there's an actual site plan, whatever you said?
To be clear, to be clear, I'm not saying that we're prohibited from doing it sooner, but Brad did say these things do take a lot of effort, and so he wants to know that if he's going to do it in connection with a real development proposal, that's wait until he gets a site plan in. To stop it from being done sooner, I'm not saying it can't be done sooner, but there's a work effort involved, and so that's the purpose of the last line.
Yeah. What we're saying is we can do it sooner, but Brad will catch it for sure at the site plan stage.
Okay.
This is Joel, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Joel.
I have a suggestion to Mr. Pittman's point, perhaps in an abundance of caution, in the sentence that says, after notice to the affected VOPH MPUD owner, what if we added into adjacent property owners?
Yeah, I think that helps.
And then that way, whether it's deferred until site plan, as David says, or if someone came in and said, hey, I want mine done now, either way, this provision would require notice to the adjacent property owner.
Yeah, that would probably do it.
This is David. I agree with that, Shane. I think that's a helpful suggestion.
Got it. And I wrote it down.
Thank you, Joel.
And the adjacent property owners after it says, after notice the affected VOPH MPUD owner. Okay. Okay.
Chairman.
Yes.
Ernie, could I hear the Barbara Wilhite footnote one more time, read?
What she said?
What she wanted added?
She wanted to remove completely the village separator.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. The other one. Okay.
Yeah, I got that.
David, David's got, it's on, David, read what she said.
So after the first sentence, where it says the VOPH comprehensive plan amendments to chapter 2 shall apply both prospectively and retroactively to existing MPDs already approved in VOPH, we would add a parenthetical that said, except for excluded projects, close paren.
Okay, can you give me an example of an excluded project?
Well, there's a whole list actually.
Watergrass. An example is Watergrass. There's 4 or 5 MPDs that were approved in VOPH before we ever had a VOPH.
Oh, I got you. You're talking about things that were approved before VOPH even existed.
Right.
Correct.
And they keep their existing situations and they don't pay surcharges. Yeah.
That term excluded projects is a defined term in both the comp plan and the land development code. So basically those 4 or 5 MPUDs that were approved before we ever had VOPH.
I got you. Okay, thank you very much. I just was unclear on that. Thank you.
Okay, move on.
Let's move on.
So I think now we're gonna go to the utilities section. Pat, can you switch? Can you get Pat's PowerPoint? Pat, you're still there, I hope, right?
No, I left.
And he's going to tell you the latest and greatest about the utility master plan. It's Pat's, the one that says Pat Gasaway, the one that is, yeah. Where did you let off? Do you remember put it on and we'll just skip through where we let off.
Okay, we'll skip forward there. Yeah, after the core reserve, I had the similar language and discussion about the separators, which you guys have already dealt with. And same thing on the applicability. All right. So now, when it comes to the financial plan, the big heavy lift was to address the lack of utilities. But the first thing I want to mention is a minor change, and that is dealing with transportation that was previously dealt with back in May. And then the final thing is to talk about the credits that now have been accumulated by the various property owners within the property owners group. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. When it comes to the transportation item, the county made a substantive change by eliminating the multifamily apartment incentives, and consequently that had an effect on our calculations for the transportation development fee. We've elected now to recognize that townhome development is the likely predominant attached development product that we'll expect to see in the near term. And I'll remind the committee that, you know, we do go through an update of this financial plan with regular frequency. I believe that the interval now is set at 5 years, or when the county goes through their choice of making the interval more frequent. But in any event, when we changed the multifamily development fee in VOPH, it had a minor effect on the transportation numbers. You can see in the bottom left-hand chart here on the second row where it says Phase 2 update. You can see that the surcharge is now being proposed at $244 per single-family detached conventional unit. In May, you just adopted it where that surcharge was $259. So a great big $15 reduction was the result of the new arithmetic with regard to that change. Just wanted to make sure that the policy committee was aware that there was a minor change associated with what had previously been adopted back in May.
Thank you.
Going to the next slide. We see the page out of the financial plan that shows the document calculations. That new development fee completely offsets the necessary $275 million capital improvement budget. So if you go to the next slide, this is where we have a discussion about frankly the star of the show for this financial plan update. The Villages of Pasadena Hills is an area that doesn't enjoy a great deal of utility infrastructure, and consequently, the Pasco County Utilities Department very kindly created a master utility plan and a preliminary budget that describes the cost of the transmission lines within the Villages of Pasadena Hills. They brought that forward in April of 2020. If we go to the next slide. What we ended up doing is creating the calculations that define for the various land uses within the Villages of Pasadena Hills what the water development fees are. Here in this chart, you can see that the water fee currently is $1,171. And when we cover the charges that are necessary to build the transmission main infrastructure, it requires a surcharge of $1,928. That the addition of those two result in a $3,099 water development fee within VOPH. And that applies to the single-family detached unit. When we go through the other calculations, you see that multifamily in a similar way ends up with a $950 surcharge. That brings that water development fee to $1,527. And the important part to recognize here is in the retail, office, and industrial fronts. So none of the non-residential land uses are charged a surcharge for water development fees in Pasadena Hills. This is very similar to the concept that we wanted to avoid having surcharges for those land uses that we wanted to provide the most welcoming atmosphere and get those to come more quickly in Pasadena Hills. We go to the next slide. We take the opportunity to show the chart from the fees or from the financial plan that demonstrates the calculation of the fees. The water fees there generate about $54 million worth of income from the surcharges alone in order to fund the transmission mains within VOPH. Go to the next slide. In a very similar way, we go through wastewater development fees for all of the land uses within villages of Pasadena Hills. Here we see a $593 surcharge for single family and a $292 surcharge for multifamily. And again, in a similar methodology, we avoid any surcharges at all for the non-residential land uses while dealing with wastewater development fees. Moving to the next slide, we reinforce the calculations page from the financial plan. And in summary, let's go to the next slide. Here we show for a single-family detached unit here, we're showing the development fees. Transportation is at $244. That would be the $15 decrease that results from the multifamily change. The school land and the park land have had no changes since the adoption in May. So they're still at the school land at $112 per dwelling unit and the park land at $200 per dwelling unit. When we move to the water transmission line surcharge, that is $1,928 per unit. And it's important here to reinforce one of the items that's very important to the utilities department. The existing $3,901 total for water and wastewater in their base impact fees are able to be utilized anywhere inside the county, not just within the villages of Pasadena Hills. So when you look specifically at the water transmission line surcharge, it is $593 per unit. The administrative fee had, again, no change since the adoption in May. When you accumulate all of these surcharges, the surcharges in VOPH is $3,477.14 per dwelling unit. And of that, the news is $2,506 is the amount of increase from the adoption in May. These are the methodologies that are consistent with all of the others that we've used in the financial plan. And it's important here to recognize that $3,000 surcharge, the $3,477 is the amount above and beyond what anyone else would pay in the suburban area. Okay. If we go to the next slide. This is the chart where in the financial plan we reflect all of the surcharges for each one of the 4 residential development forms that we expect in the VOPH. This is the chart that makes it easy to recognize that, you know, in terms of the water and wastewater fees, there's 0 surcharges in any of the retail, office, and industrial land uses. Okay. So now if we move to the next slide, this is in an item that in the stewardship district where we specifically identify the magnitude of the administrative fee credit amount for each of the property owners within the property owner group. As that we document here the amount of money that they have spent on the planning effort and on the county's behalf. Okay. So now and I guess it's a simple matter to note that there were no changes to the master roadway plan as part of this update since May. At that point, I'd like to make sure that I have the opportunity to address any of the questions that the committee might have for the financial plan update and the modifications necessary for the stewardship district to carry those forward.
Okay, at this time, is there any questions, comments?
One of the things I want to know is for the POG members, I'm kind of outnumbered here now. The surcharges, is that basically going to pay them for everything that they put into this, the fees and the money that they've paid out for these developments or plans? I don't know who that would be.
Actually, no. The surcharges are charged to everyone. I think what you're alluding to is the amount of the credits that the POG owners have are only reduced by the administrative fee that is one component of the fees charged in Pasadena Hills. So the surcharges are paid by everybody that is subject to the overlay.
All right, thank you.
Pat, you say those surcharges are credited back?
Right. So, for example, when let's talk about the utility fee surcharges for a moment. If especially in the beginning, applicants who are going to come to VOPH, they discover that there's an absence of utility transmission lines. When they construct those utility lines to get the utility services in the vicinity of their project, they create a credit balance, and that credit balance in utilities is able to be offset by the surcharge amount only. So the base fee amount will always be paid to utilities in cash, but the surcharge amount would be available to reduce as credits for those applicants who have installed those transmission lines.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Any other questions? Okay, outstanding work, Pat. You and Joel and everybody else who was involved. Outstanding work, Pat. Sure, you replaced the batteries in your calculator a couple of times.
If I may, this is Charles Cullen from Pasco County Utilities. I just had maybe a clarifying question. I have no comments on what was presented per se, other than the fact that the table presents the base fee for water and reclaim. It's envisioned that the vast majority of the planned area will get water and reclaim. There is a difference in the base fee if reclaim is not installed. And that's about a $400 difference, and that's not presented. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And
Okay, thank you, Charles. I appreciate that clarification. Okay, Ernie?
I just want to ask a quick question. David, are you there?
Yes.
Did you want to comment anything about this?
No, just that I'm concerned that we never made a motion on the prior items because I think the motion may be complicated now. Because we've heard now basically 4 different items and at least two of them had changes. So
right.
I'm not sure how we're going to handle this procedurally, but my preference would have been that we had made a motion on each item after we heard it.
Okay.
But we didn't do that. So
okay.
We're gonna walk through it now.
We're gonna walk through this now. I'm gonna walk through, and let's just proceed cautiously as we walk through this. We'll start with the comp plan amendment. Okay. What I think we've agreed to is we're accepting the POG revisions plus some modifications, which include that the category 1 wetlands, that 25-foot buffer is going to be inconsistent. It's going to be consistent with what is already in the land development code section to that. So that's an addition. The Corps Reserve Clark recommended that the applicant has to actually provide the field surveys and all those things. That's an addition. That the applicant himself is responsible for providing those changes. We're going to add the word width to the map. Remember the map?
Wait, Ernie, stop.
Yeah.
Let's get a motion and vote on the first item, which is the core reserve issue. Okay. Are there any changes? I'd like to do this one at a time so that if somebody disagrees with some part of one of the other items, we don't have an issue. So let's get a motion and vote on just the core reserve issue first.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a motion for okay, let's do the easiest one first. Okay? And that's the one that does not have all that language to it. And that's the one that we just talked about, the financial plan and the utility plan.
Oh, then okay, so you want to do the utility plan first. You're basically what you're doing is you're making a recommendation to the board to accept the revisions in the financial plan, which includes the master utility plan.
As stated.
As stated in the POG.
Okay. So do I have amendment?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, madam, would you like to do a roll call vote?
Mr. Emmett Evans,
Accept.
Mr. Andrew Getz,
Yes.
Mr. Dale Maggard,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Philman,
Yes.
Chairman Paul Fenora.
Yes. Okay, we're down to 3, Ernie.
Okay.
All right, what's the next easiest one?
Now, well, actually, we have to do the stewardship ordinance last because that's consistency with what we all agreed to. So I think we go to the core reserve section, and the only change, what you're suggesting, what you've discussed about was to make a recommendation to the LPA and the BCC on the POG revisions to the core reserve, but add the thing that says as long you're adding under item A that it's consistent, the 25-foot line is consistent with LDC code section.
So we're reducing it from 100 to 25, so that is consistent with current LDC requirements.
Yeah, but you don't need to mention the numbers. You could just basically say we're consistent with the county's LDC code.
Okay.
Okay, in that area. And Clark's recommendation is also part of that because he wanted to make sure that the applicant is responsible for doing the field surveys and necessary work to justify any border changes. So that's the second thing.
Are the only 2 changes for the core?
Those are the only 2 changes on the core reserve.
Okay. Do I have a motion as stated? Do I have a second? I have a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Emmett Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Getz,
Yes.
Mr. Dale Maggard,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Philman,
Yes.
Chairman Paul Fenora.
Yes.
Okay. Then, now we're switching to the village separator. And the changes with that is to add the word with. Okay, so if there's a change in the width, they can go before you and say, hey, I can only handle 25 feet, not 150 or whatever it is. So that's the only change in the village separator issue. We are keeping the village separator in pretty
Language
much,
as it currently is.
Yes.
Because it allows some flexibility.
as proposed by POG. Yes, I'm sorry. We are revising the village separators by what the POG requests, and we're just adding one word, width to the map.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
It's technically 2 words. It's or with. It's or with.
David, say that again. What?
It's technically 2 words. You're adding or with after.
Yes, or with. Yes, or with.
Say locations and or width.
Yes, it says location now. Now we're going to say location or width.
Okay. Is it either or? Or is it and or?
It could be both, and or with whatever.
it's and.
Well, maybe you want to say and/or, because it could be both.
Yeah, it's both. It should be both.
It could be both.
You can say and/or if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, that's how.
Now after 3 words.
Good point. Okay.
And a 3 words and a slash.
What was that, Joel?
I know, but you better start muting somebody out there.
3 words and a slash, technically.
Drew, did you want to add something else?
I was asking the question, isn't this where Barbara asked for the except for excluded projects?
Oh,
that's a different item.
Oh, wait, no, that's later.
Okay.
That's coming later.
Well, we only got one more.
Yes.
And what about the notice to landowners? Is that also in the next section?
That's the next item.
Yeah. So this item is the comp plan village separators and/or is added to that.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move we accept the POG language with the additional and/or.
With. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Emmett Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Getz,
Yes.
Mr. Del Maggard,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Philman,
Yes.
Chairman Paul Fenora.
Yes. Okay, Ernie, take us home.
Okay, the final comprehensive plan change are 2 items. You're taking the POG revisions as proposed. You're adding and to adjacent property owners is when the notification is given out for administrative changes, and you're adding the affected pre-approval. Okay, notice the adjacent landowners, and then there was the one about excluded properties.
The Barbara Wilhite.
Yeah, that one as well. Plus the excluded properties, basically,
Projects.
because they don't really affect it. We're not tampering with those guys. So that's that one.
Projects, I think, Ernie.
Yeah, excluded projects. Yes, projects. Got it. Okay.
Okay.
You want to try
motion?
that one again?
Motion? Motion as stated? Second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Emmett Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Getz,
Yes.
Mr. Del Maggard,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Philman,
Yes.
Chairman Paul Fenora.
Yes.
Okay. Now there's just one more item, and that's just to let you know that the land development code has to be consistent. So we have to make sure, we have to go back again and look at it again just to make, because we're adding these things to make sure there's no conflict. So let me go back to that where I can find it at the end of my presentation here. Okay. Oh yeah, it was just basic. Okay, it's in your agenda. If you look at your letter, the agenda memo, it just documents the consistency among documents. And here you can look at it here. Ensure that what is agreed upon the utility master plan is added to the land development code, and it has. I verified these things. It's in there. The additional definitions, they're in there. They had to add definitions. There were credits for surcharges. That's really a key point here. Only the surcharges are creditable. Those base fees are not. And the utilities department has the ability to use those base fees countywide, but those surcharges that are collected have to stay within the borders of VOPH. And the fee registry includes now adding the utility surcharge credits. All those text changes are in the proposed POG stewardship ordinance.
Hey, Ernie, let me ask something on the ability for the PCU to use base fees countywide. Is that the norm throughout the county?
These are special
Yes.
districts.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
All right. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
We
David.
get to use their money too, right?
Right. That was my point.
That's right.
Right.
Other people's money, baby. Other people's money. Okay.
Okay, so take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. I'll adjourn.
No, roll
So
call.
no, you need a roll call on that one.
Oh, so we're doing the final one.
Well, it's a stewardship board. It's
Oh,
an
yeah.
LDC.
I apologize. I thought we were done. Okay. You're right. All right. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, Mr. Emmett Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Getz,
Yes.
Mr. Dale Maggard,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Philman,
Yes.
Chairman Paul Fenora.
Yes.
Okay, that's everything for today.
Ernie? Okay. Ernie, thank you very much for your time. Joel, Pat, everybody else, thank you for all the work that you guys put in, David, and I guess everybody else dropped off. So anyway, thanks for all the effort you guys put in.
Wait, one more thing. Just the calendar so you're aware of this, okay? This goes before your recommendation goes before the LPA on November 5th. The public hearing now is changed because they switched places. It was supposed to go for December 8th in Dade City, but now they switched that to November, and there is no meeting there's only one meeting in December, and it's in Newport Richey. I don't have the January calendar yet, but realistically, what this means is it goes to the LPA, right, November 5th. It goes, the first hearing is going to be in January, the first week in January, but or second week, I don't know the exact date yet. And then the final hearing will be in February, okay?
I have to go to LPA and not straight to the BCC.
The LPA handles the comprehensive plan amendments. It's a piece, it's not all this, it's not all everything, it's just the comprehensive plan amendment. That's all it's about. That's all the LPA does.
We got rid of that process.
Yeah, so did I.
They have to still see it. David, doesn't the LPA has to see that? We did it to phase one.
Yeah, when the board created the planning commission, or recreated the planning commission, they made the planning commission the LPA. They did not make your committee the LPA for passing those items. So it is what it is. Realistically, though, the planning commission does not make comments on these. It'll probably just get approved on consent.
Okay.
Okay.
And thing to note also is that the very last hearing in February, that's when actually the financial plan update will be a resolution. The golf cart will be a resolution, and the fee credit registry will be a resolution. The board will handle that, but you've given the recommendation to go ahead, so they can go for that. Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. We all good? Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
If all else business is satisfied, I call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ernie, you want these back?
No, you can keep those. I mean, it's great reading
So
material.
you want them back, I take it?
No.
Just leave them right here?
No, take it with you, please.
The only thing I really want is a clip, man.
It's $1.50
You never find a big clip when you need it.